Good morning, friends, and a very warm welcome from the Savoy Hotel Sub Post Office. It's a historic post office which was established in 1902 and has seen many a letter go and many a letter come. But today we're going to be talking about military letters and military history, and we are indeed privileged that we have with us Dr. Jitendra Singh, who is a Union Minister of State, independent charge for the Ministry for Development of Northeastern Region. He's also the MOS in the Prime Minister's office, in the Atomic Energy office, and of course the Department of Personnel and Training. As a doctor by profession, he did his MBBS from Stanley at Chennai and is now a world-renowned authority on diabetes. He's written very extensively and has been invited to many fora on the subject of his specialization. But the interesting thing about Dr. Jitendra Singh is that he has a lot of interest, many more interests than one would attribute to a doctor and to a person who's deeply invested in politics. He's been elected twice from the Udhampur constituency. And it's such a pleasure for us that the very first session that we'll be doing in the military history strategy vertical is on the Valiant Dogras. So in a way, his constituency connects with the main session that we have. But he has a very long list of accomplishments. So I think we can all Google his accomplishment. But some of the things which I'll certainly like to highlight is that during the 2008 Amarnath land row agitation, he was a member of the core committee, and it led to a positive resolution. He is the author of several books, several articles, and used to write for Times of India, Tribune, and many others. And he's been narrating stories of how excited he was when his name would come in print in the middles. The two important things that I have learned from him in the last 2 years of my association is one, he was the first person to use the word physical rather than social distancing in the context of the pandemic. And the other very important statement which he made when he came to address the academy on its Diamond Jubilee, said that institutions have lives in terms of decades, and nations have lives in terms of centuries, and civilizations have lives in terms of millennia. So this is Dr. Jitendra Singh for you. Great welcome, sir. We are pleased, very delighted that you are here with us to inaugurate this session. Last year also we had invited you, but this is the advantage of the virtual. So you have to come. There is there is little reason for you to not join us today, sir. And I'm also very delighted to welcome Shiv Kunal Verma. So Shiv is actually the advisor for the military history strategy vertical at VoW. As you are aware, sir, we have 4 knowledge verticals, and one of them is the military history and strategy vertical. And today we are also very privileged that you are launching the book by Shiv and his better half, Deepti Bhalla. They've been working together since the mid-80s on a series of films, starting with the Tiger series. They've done films on the Army, they've done films on the Air Force. And the most important thing which you would enjoy, sir, is the fact that following the footsteps of the legendary Dogra general Zorawar Singh, he moved over 17,000 feet at the Umasi La, which links the Kishtwar Valley with Sanskar. And there are many books that he's written. In fact, my library here is also replete of books from Shiv and Deepti. And he's also a very good ornithologist. He's also clicked a lot of pictures of birds, which are there in several institutions. So and this book that we are discussing today has been published by Nepen. It's in the large format, and it's been published by the New York-based Hon'ble Press, thereby making its international debut. And the Sunday Guardian, in a rare tribute, said that after Varier Elwyn, this work is perhaps going to be the most defining and the most standard work on life and culture in the Northeast. With these few words, may I invite you to inaugurate the military history strategy sessions and also launch the book. After you've launched the book, or before you launch the book, Shiv, you can speak about the book if you'd like to in more detail. But let me welcome Dr. Jitendra Singh.
Can we first go through the ceremony of launching the book?
Yes, I think that might be very good. Shiv, why don't you speak a few words about the book, and then we launch the book.
Thank you, Dr. Jitendra.
Sorry?
It's a pleasure to meet you, Minister, even online. And thank you, Dr. Chopra, for your your introduction. This book on the Northeast has taken us 5 years of extensive shooting. We started it in 2008 and we finished in 2012. And then we had produced something called the Northeast Trilogy, which is a set of 3 books with the idea of introducing people not only in the outside the Northeast to the Northeast, but also within the Northeast to each other. Because we found that a lot of uh, there was not enough information flowing, not only in state to state, but even in certain areas, people living in one side of the river didn't know anything about the tribes living on the other side of the river. It was a wonderful experience. As I said, it took me 5 years of very hard shooting. We went from just about every village, and then we were also very grateful to the government of India because they gave us a lot of helicopter support. But by the time we got the sanction for that, we had already done everything from the ground. The large format book has been published by Mapin, who is considered to be one of the best coffee table book publishers in the country, in fact, in the world. And as Dr. Chopra mentioned, Hon'ble Press has also launched it in New York. So the book is now going to be making its international debut, both in the United States as well as in mainland Europe. So it's a privilege to have you launch it, sir, especially since you're also the donor minister. And I hope you enjoy reading the book when you have the time.
Sure, my pleasure. So, thank you, Chief. Good morning to all those who are connected in this afternoon session. And good morning to all the superannuated generals, admirals, marshals, ambassadors, secretaries, vice chancellors, professors, friends from the media, most importantly, the young officers, the defense forces, the NCC cadets, RI and MC cadets, students from sainik schools, Kendriya Vidyalaya, and JNU. At the outset, I have to compliment you and thank you both simultaneously. I have to compliment you for having come out with this beautiful compilation and an exemplary authorship, which I'm sure must have taken a good amount of diligence and research and hard work. I know it's not that easily done. It appears to the others that you can create a book overnight, but it takes a lot of not only sweat but also blood from the one who is actually engaged in doing so. So I have to really compliment you. While saying so, there is a famous couplet from I think Kumar Bashi, which says कि हमसे पूछे लहू मांगती है गजल कितना, सब समझते हैं ये धंधा आराम का है. जो कोई शायरी करता है किताब लिखता बोलता है करता रहता है, चलता रहता है. वो सोचते हैं कि ये तो चलता रहता है, बस कुछ नहीं करता, शायरी करता है. और ये हमसे पूछे कि लहू मांगती है गजल कितना. So it's not only said, a lot of blood must have gone into this, both from Shiv and his better half, Deepti. So I have to compliment you for that. And I have, as I said, simultaneously to thank you for making me a part of this brief but graceful and a very important ceremony, which is on a subject which is close to my heart, as Sanjeev Chopra ji was saying. And I also have to thank Dr. Sanjeev Chopra for a very, very kind introduction. And always when he introduces me, he tends to remind me of myself. Because when you get into politics, you tend to underplay your other side because then you are not taken seriously as a politician. So if you project yourself too much of as a medical professional or an author of books, then they feel, you know, Kabiraj, it's not meant to be part of your Raj. So it's a very contradictory combination. But over a period of time, some of us have successfully learned to drive a balance. And he was recalling and remembering and reminding me of my times of the middle writing. And that's true. I was a youngster. I was, bashed into the Bahadur Shah Zafar Road of Times of India. Mr. Tewari was he was the assistant editor in charge of the middles. So once a middle got published, I flooded it with over 100 middles. None of them got published for the next 6 months. So I pointed to his office. That I believe I am publishable. That's why you publish, and now nothing. So he pointed out to me there's a huge pile of reaching up to his roof. So he said, because there was no electronic. Yeah. So he said, now in a week we have 5 days because Sunday goes into the magazine, Sunday Times. And out of these 6 days, one day is reserved for me because my employer wants to earn me through writing as well. So Wednesday is reserved for the ex officio author, and left 5 days. So he said we have Raj Chatterjee, we have C.L. Proudfoot, we have Maxwell Ferreira, all those well-known names in the middle. So we keep repeating. So you tell me where your name would come for the second time now. So anyway, that was a thrill of a different nature, but now the times have changed, and one of the manifestation of the change times is the manner in which we are meeting today. So we have a number of other means. I'm glad for this generation to give outlet to their expression. It's opened up in so many ways, electronically and virtually, semi-virtually, and in every way. And therefore, it gives me an added pleasure, and it's my privilege to formally release today the book Life and Culture in Northeast, co-authored by D.T. Bhalla Verma along with Shiv Konal Verma. And I am also delighted while I was going through and listening to Dr. Sanjeev Chopra that this book becomes even more special and exclusive, which I think I can appreciate in a special manner because it has reference to the Valiant Dogras and tries to connect with that. And since my official constituency is Northeast, my parliamentary constituency is a part of the Dogra land. So that enables me to connect with the two regions that I am, answerable for. And this book has drawn a very sensible relationship between the two because the Dogras have indeed played a very important role in defending the northeast borders, and that has been since long time, it's over several decades, and even in early 1960s when we had NEFA, the Northeast Frontier Agency. We had the JK regiment posted over there, the Dogra regiment posted over there, and many of the whole lot of that regiment was in fact put on duty there, immediately moved over to NEFA when this China thing broke out. And in fact, even personally, two of my uncles were there in the army. Now, of course, no more. One of them had gone missing, and then he came back after 3-4 months. He could be recovered. The other one had an injury on the hand. So there's a huge connect, and I am sure many Dogra families, even today, maybe their third generation or second generation, will be able to recall the part played by their warriors of the earlier generation in the Northeast. So that makes it all the more special. And I'm also glad that this book gives an extensive account, as was being mentioned by Kunal briefly, of the history, the culture, the landscapes, and the distinguished region of Northeast, and a towering journey beginning from Kanchenjunga in Sikkim to tea plantations in Assam, to the biodiversity of Arunachal Pradesh, to the martial tribes and churches of Nagaland, to the birthplace of polo in Manipur, to the living room bridges of Meghalaya, and to the farms among the hills of Tripura and Mizoram. And special sections in this book, I believe, also have been devoted to highlight the exceptional flora and fauna. I'm going to keep this not only for my reading, but also as an important reference book on my table, so it can come handy whenever we are looking for any of these subjects or trying to work on any of these areas. As a part of our responsibilities also in the Ministry of Development of Northeast region, and even for the scholars we have in a huge number. And so I do agree to a great extent with Kunal when he was saying that, in fact, even the same experience I would rather share with him, that there's much to learn from Northeast for the rest of India. In fact, when I came into this department or ministry in 2014. Before that, I had absolutely no exposure to Northeast directly because I'd never been to that region. I never had any of the friends or relations from there. I had hardly read about the region also, and in fact, even when I joined the political organization, I was usually given the responsibilities for the states of the Northeast, of the North India, or sometimes of South India because they thought I was bilingual and I could manage there. But never, I mean, my profile was never considered to be compatible with work in Northeast. So all of a sudden, when I was handed over this, so I was new to it. In fact, so new and so naive that first time when I landed in Guwahati, I was loaded with all the woolens. I thought the world's largest river being there, it must be terribly cold. Till I landed sweating all over, and I was told that this area is supposed to be humid. You come with a wrong kind of mental picture about the whole thing. So what I'm trying to say is that then I was actually very inquisitive to ask everybody, to try to learn from everybody, to educate myself about the region because I know I was expected to discharge a huge responsibility over there. So everybody who would meet me, every third person would give me one advisor that was common from all, solicited, unsolicited, because in India it's very easy to find an advice. Everybody has an advice to offer. So it's not difficult. It's the most easily available commodity. So everybody would tell me one thing. They would say, why don't you do something to bring Northeast closer to rest of India? So that was a common, sermon or advice. So one day, suddenly it occurred to my mind when I was, because by then I had started traveling extensively and trying to, get first-hand information of the people and the places. So I asked myself, why nobody tells me why not bring rest of India closer to Northeast? Because there's so much to learn actually. As you have rightly mentioned, the human development indicators like literacy, like women emancipation. So I jokingly said one day, I said, do you know what you have to learn from Northeast? Most of all, what I said in rest of India, at least in my times, there used to be a high school essay, write an essay on women liberation, women emancipation. I said this subject becomes irrelevant when you land in Northeast because the women are much more liberated and emancipated than you can visualize in the rest of India. And my colleagues had a hearty laugh when I said, if you, going by the Hindu belief, if you do good karma in this janma, then you take birth as a man in Northeast. It's not easy because there you have the concept of house husband.
Yes, I know.
Man and women folk do all the work. So they asked me, is this what you have gathered? I said, this is precisely. I mean, to sum up, because there's a whole lot of misconception about Northeast in this part of India. And I tell you, this fact has been retreated and made evident again and again, even in the recent Corona times. I was citing all over. I said, look here, in the early phase of lockdown, we would get these panic demands from all over the country for masks, etc. Now, of course, it's been part of the manufacturing trade, but that time the masks were not easily available. But we never faced such a problem in Northeast because the women folk there and the self-help women groups are inherently so vibrant and such a good tradition that they have. They started making masks at home, and of all the designs, all the colors, you could change the mask depending upon the color of the clothes or the garments that you were wearing. So that is something what we have to learn. Then literacy. You have, I don't think any of these states in Northeast has a literacy rate less than 95%. Some of them all 99, 100%. And a small state like Mizoram has about 97, 98%, next only to Kerala. And that I also always say that the comparison is unequal simply because of the fact that Kerala has a legacy of high literacy rate. Even during the British times, that part of the country had a higher literacy rate, whereas Mizoram was born only in 80s. It came as a state only in the 80s. So you see, there's so much that we have to learn. And now, if you go around, even in the capital city of Delhi, some of the best of the scholars, the best of the faculties, and the best of the colleges and universities are from Northeast. It's just that they lead a life which is very self-contented, low profile. They don't blow their trumpet, so they may not be so noticeable as some of us Punjabis are. We would start dancing at the drop of hat, or even if the hat doesn't drop. I think Dr. Chopra will bear me out. So since that culture and discipline and lifestyle is different, so we don't notice it. But of late, I have started pointing out to many of the friends. I said, did you notice that even in the South India circuit, if you fly in an aircraft, the crew is from Northeast. So that is the change which has happened in the last 3-4 years. Their acceptability and this has happened because of the work done by different scholars and from different fields, and the works like the one that Shiv Kunal has produced today, because these have helped to bridge the gap, not only physically, but also psychologically. So, to that extent, I think this is a huge contribution, because, as I said, the gender equality and the other factors which we may not be able to appreciate because we are living in a different kind of a milieu. Similarly, as far as the government is concerned and being a part of the Modi government, I think this also book will supplement the efforts as far as the Act East policy is concerned, because we had Look East policy, which Prime Minister Modi converted into Act East policy, considering the fact that we had to do something to now act and just stop looking only. And to my mind, I think if you have to act and to engage with the borders across the eastern borders, what is important is to act proximally first, because if you have to engage in a meaningful trade with a country like, for example, Myanmar or Bangladesh, you could find takers for the products from Northeast, whether it's handicraft, whether it's handloom, even for eatables, the common eating habits, common lifestyles, common cultures. You cannot take moongfali or groundnut from Gujarat and then expect to sell it across to Myanmar, because there will be no takers. They don't even take dal. Another incident interesting happened, because when I see Dr. Chopra, I feel enthused to share some of the things which are not shared in the government circle. About 3 years back, I happened to be sitting with the industry minister of Myanmar, and in my plate there was a bowl of dal. So he said, "What is this?" I said, "Oh, this is a very staple food we take." So he said, "Can I have a taste of it?" So I gave him a part of it. He tasted 2 spoons. So he said, "It tastes good. Can I have more?" I said, "No, Excellency, you cannot have more." So he looked back at me at that inhospitable remark. I said, "You know why? Because India is a buyer of pulses and dal from Myanmar. So we are assured buyers." For many years, possibly he had lost, that sight of that fact. I said, because nobody takes dal in Myanmar, so entire dal, and there's a huge growth of dal, is, sent over to India. So India is assured buyer. So I said, if you develop a taste, then loss will be ours. So you keep taking what you have. Keep sending dal to us. So that what I'm trying to say is, on a serious note, is that the trade and business with the Northeastern or the ASEAN countries can also happen effectively. Only we have effectively empowered this part of the Northeastern region and the Eastern region. And as far as the Act East is concerned, I am also glad to note, as a part of the government, that Prime Minister Modi, one of the earliest decisions he took was to engage himself in the Indo-Bangladesh agreement, whereby the exchange of those enclaves happened. Otherwise, we had to travel all around, to cross through Bangladesh and then go over to Tripura, etc. Now you can go straight. So that was not very cost effective and not give ease of business as well. And I sometimes wonder why it didn't happen before, because it should have happened at least 45 years ago, right at the time of the birth of Bangladesh. But somehow that never caught the priority of the earlier governments. So that also reflects how serious Prime Minister Modi himself is to develop Northeast at par with the rest of the country, the more developed areas of the country, and at the same time to engage with the northeastern borders. And as far as the Dogras is concerned, I'm glad that the MHS begins with a tribute to the Valiant Dogras, and we have a very distinguished panel to discuss the history and tradition of one of the strongest martial races in the country. You see, that is borne out by the fact that when Britishers, set up army in India, they identified the martial races first. So they went about very scientifically, not politically as we tend to go. We tend to have one person from each region, each religion, each sect, and each caste. So, the other considerations take the toll of the scientific parameters. So they identified Dogra and set up a Dogra regiment. They set up a Gurkha regiment. They set up JK regiment. Then they set up a Sikh regiment. Then they set up a Kumaon regiment from the upper reaches of where Dr. Chopra is sitting. And similarly, so they first identified the martial races and then also made sure that they became a part of the army, which was then part of the Royal Army. They gave them some concessions as well. For example, the Gurkha was given a concession for his height because Gurkha was a very great warrior. But he was not as tall maybe as a Sikh. So he was given that concession in the height parameter in the recruitment. So was also the Dogras, because Dogras also were not very tall, many of them. Those coming from the Kandi area, the area which is less irrigated, known as Kandi area in North India. So you had a huge lot of good, valiant warriors among Dogras, but racially their height was little lesser compared to the Sikhs. So this itself is a testimony to the fact that they were, by heritage, by inheritance, and by birth, great warriors, and they were unique in the sense that they were deeply invested in our tradition and culture and made a mark. And as I said, they have played a role even in defending the northeast borders during the earlier times and even during the more recent times and even today. And most of the chiefs of the army staff that we have had in India, for them, I was telling one of the generals that my observation is that two postings are most important. One in the northeast, other one at Udhampur command station, because that is what controls, Firozpur and all those air strikes in Pakistan. So most of the chiefs have been corps commanders at these two places. So see the connect between the two regions, the northeast and the Dogra region, and even today that is recognized as a profile value addition. So I'm glad that you have devoted time to that. And the northern border of India was established by the conquest of the legendary General Zorawar Singh, who is still, remembered with a great amount of inspiration and reverence in the Dogra land. And he conquest, often called the McMahon line. The history and management of that border has meant India never afford to lose her grip. So we have a distinguished panel, I'm told, to discuss this. I would miss out for that, but I look forward to have the proceedings so that I could educate myself. I'm sure Dr. Chopra will oblige me.
Definitely.
And then also with regard to the fourth session, I'm told about the self-reliance in defense. So I was quite gratified to read that, because now that Prime Minister Modi, particularly in the aftermath of this pandemic, has given a special thrust to Atmanirbhar Bharat. So when we go about becoming Atmanirbhar, we've already launched ourselves on that path as far as the healthcare sector is concerned. We are now in a position to even export kits. Earlier on, we were short of that. So I'm sure in the defense also, there is no reason why it can't be so. And the panel, I'm sure, is going to enlighten us, and the conclusions and the inferences of the panel could also be submitted to the concerned persons in the Ministry of Defense and the policy makers in the defense, so that I'm sure they would be glad to receive all those inputs, because that would supplement their resolve to be a part of Prime Minister's Atmanirbhar campaign. And There's taking a cue. I have also learned that they're taking a cue from RIMC. I was told by Dr. Chopra. The other schools in Dehradun have started also dwelling on the aspect in detail of having a military history taught in schools. So that's a good idea. I hope it's picked up. And you told me that this forum of principals of RIMC Dual School and hence promised to be one of the most interesting sessions. And not only teaching the military history, I don't know how far that is feasible in India because you have too many opinions, too many voices, and too many political thoughts operating simultaneously because there is a huge subcontinent. But in Great Britain, for long, it had been a tradition to spend not only to read military history, but also spend a couple of years in the army, and then to go on to choose whatever profession you have. Even Winston Churchill had spent some time in the army. So that gave them not only reinforced their feeling of commitment to their motherland, the sense of patriotism, but also gave them a sense of the hardship and a great service and a great favor that a soldier guarding the borders does to all of us. That's what I always say, that we go off to sleep peacefully because there is somebody, some young lad, remaining sleepless whole night, guarding us. And we have a full meal stomach because there's somebody not fully fed on the duty. And I've seen this with my own eyes. I was in Kargil last year. I had an opportunity because part of my constituency is also on the international border. And one day I was traveling on 5 years back. And that was a relatively terror-affected area, and it was a twilight time of 7:30 or so when I saw there a Naga boy, maybe just about 20 years, all alone, patrolling the road. And I told the person sitting next to me, he said, if somebody ambushes him and kills him, nobody would be able to discover that till morning. So that kind of service. So it's both ways. But the Dogras guarding the northeast borders, the northeast lads, Nagas guarding the Dogra land. So, however much we may or may not be knowing each other, but in the realms of the defense, we are very akin to each other. Even today, we have many of northeastern young lads found in the cantonment areas in the militancy-infested Kashmir. And the kind of sacrifice and service they render, I think there can be no redemption or no repayment for that. And all of us are eternally indebted to that. So I'm glad that you have a session devoted to that also. I've been following the writings of General Punu, who recently wrote on the Internet of Military, and Dr. Chopra always is kind enough to connect me to these writings which emerge from time to time. And I like to compliment all of you for drawing our attention to the fact that future wars will be based on artificial intelligence. Of course, artificial intelligence is going to come handy everywhere. In fact, even when you and I talk, we are talking, making use of some facets of artificial intelligence by being with each other and yet not being with each other. So that also is one aspect of the artificial intelligence. And I'm glad that we are celebrating the 50th anniversary of the USI with such legendary generals. And I wish that the outcomes of these sessions would not only make all of us wiser, but also serve as a very valuable research material for future analysts and historians and also the policy makers. And I shall look forward to also receive whatever significant transpires out of this. And I think all of us are lucky that we have as a director somebody like Dr. Chopra, who is too many things in one. So he's not only a director per se, he's also an author, a philosopher, a thinker, an academician, and a curious observer of things. So I think as long as he's there, we should make the best use of his being there, which I hope we would be able to. Thank you very much, Dr. Chopra, for making me a part of this beautiful small session. I hope to be with you over and over again. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you, sir.
I request Shiv to propose the vote of thanks.
So I have been listening to you with a lot of interest, because every subject you've touched upon is something very dear to my heart. I must get my other book to you, sir, the 1962, The War That Wasn't, which is documentation of the entire fighting that took place.
Sure,
In fact, it was my father's battalion at Namkachu which got wiped out. We lost 282 men on that morning, and it was that book is now also been doing rather well. It's been out for 4 years now, sir. It's been topping the charts, which is by itself a very interesting thing, because I think 10 years ago, people of India were not willing to listen to this. One slight thing I'd like to add to what you said, sir, the military history sessions which we are bringing into schools is actually been initiated by Vellum boys, sir. They have taken the initiative. I've been running it for the last 4 years. RIMC, Dune School, Vellum girls, even the girls are very much involved, and you will be very heartened to see the kind of enthusiasm and the kind of involvement we are getting from the children. In the seminar that we hold, we've had 40 schools, even DPS Kashmir, from Bikaner, from Trivandrum, they're all coming, sir. It's absolutely fantastic. Anyway, listening to you has been an absolute education minister. Your own widespread knowledge of the area and interests are so apparent. One could listen to you on and on. I must thank you for inaugurating this military and strategy session. It is an honor to have had you with us today, sir. I am in Kulu at the moment, but I will come next time I'm in Delhi. I will seek an appointment with you, sir. I'd like to come and spend some time with you, and let's take this a little forward, sir. Thank you again, sir. It's been an absolute privilege. It's been an absolute delight, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Good morning, friends. It's a pleasure and an honor to be here for the military history and strategy sessions at the 4th virtual online edition of the Valley of Words. From the very first year, military history and strategy has been a very significant component of the Valley of Words. And this year, it is even more special because we are celebrating and acknowledging the great work of the Valiant Dogras. We have with us a very distinguished panel today, which will be curated by Major Moshe Kohli, who is himself a second-generation Dogra officer. He and his father served in the same battalion, and he'll tell you more about that. And I'm very happy that we also have with us Jitendra Singh and my good friend Debashish Mitra, whose father was a Dogra officer. But I will not be talking about this particular session. I'll be linking this session to the remaining sessions of the military history and strategy knowledge vertical that we have, because I would want all our listeners to follow up on this session as well, because immediately after the session in which we'll be talking about the great tradition of the Dogras, especially General Jitendra Singh, we will then be talking about the northern boundary. And the northern boundary became the northern boundary only because the Dogras were able to reach those heights of the Tibetan plateau, which no one else had ever reached from India. Immediately after this session, immediately after the session of the northern boundary, and we are all aware of the dispute and the fact that we are sticking our guns to the ground this time, we'll be talking about the great game, the games which all great powers have played in the past and which they will play on in the future. But every 50 years, every 100 years, the text and the context changes. So it's no longer ideological. The alignments are more on the basis of national interests, and in that context, India also has to defend her national interests, and it will be a very interesting conversation on the great game. And then we must understand that military history, of course, is military history, but in terms of strategy, because there are two terms that we use. One is military history, the other is strategy. And when it comes to strategy, it is forward thinking, and therefore we look at how future wars will be fought. And there, my good friend General Pannu brings in the Internet of Military Things, the Internet of Battle. We have other, army officers who are going to be talking about what is going to be the future of warfare, not only for India, but throughout the world. Which brings us to the whole aspect of how do you build a strong and resilient defense industry in our own country? Is it, can we do it? And we have some of my colleagues earlier in the defense ministry, serving generals, commentators, who will be talking about how India, or can India be self-reliant in defense. And then again, we talk about artificial intelligence, I mean, how the role which AI will play in mapping out the scenarios. And it's then very important that we are also having a session on military history in schools, because for the last 5 or 6 years or a decade or so, there's an increased interest in the younger generation about how wars were fought, why wars were fought, the technology of wars, and what is going to be the future of warfare in the years to come. And therefore, we're catching them young, and I'm very glad that 4 of the finest schools in the country, the RIMC, the Doon School, Vellum boys and Vellum girls, are coming together to have a discussion on, and all the headmasters are coming to talk about military in schools. And the last session will be on the 150 years of United Services Institution, an institution of which many of us are members, and an institution which has taken a record, which has kept a historical record of all the wars, all the battles, all the theaters of war that have happened in our country since the last 150 years, and how we look at the future. So this is what the MHS sessions are going to be about. And of course, there will be a session rapporteur in each session, so we'll have a documentation on all this, because this is also very, very important. And I'm sorry I missed out one very important session, that is about the role of India, whether India has to recognize Tibet and Taiwan. And that's also part of a pan-national debate that we are organizing. So with these few words, let me invite Major Moshe Kohli to curate this discussion on the Valiant Dogras. Over to you, sir. And we look forward to a very engaging discussion. And I would also request that all of you who are online with us, please do send in your questions on the chat box, and we'll request our panelists to try to answer as many questions as we can. Over to you, Major Moshe Kohli.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sanjeev Chopra. For those of our viewers and members of the audience who don't know Mr. Chopra, he's one of the most distinguished bureaucrats who was commissioned in the Indian Administrative Service in 1985. And today he is actually the director of the Lal Bahadur National Institute, the National Academy of Administration in Missouri. He's also the curator of the Valley of Words, which is held in Dehradun every November. Mr. Chopra has written a large number of books. He's written national policy. He's lectured at the Brookings Institute. He's lectured at Oxford, and certainly a man of letters. So we're great to have you on the panel with us as well, Mr. Chopra. Lieutenant General Ranbir Singh does not need any introduction. He has been the face of the surgical strikes in Myanmar in 2015 and Pakistan occupied Kashmir in 2016. He's had 5 prestigious tenures at in the Military Operations Directorate. He was now till January the Northern Army Commander, and during his tenure, the Article 370 and the 35A were abrogated, and he actually controlled the situation and the security of the valley and the entire northern part of India. He also happens to be the colonel of the regiment, or was the colonel of the regiment for 7 years. I have the privilege of serving with him. We are from the same battalion. Great to have you with us, General Ranbir. Mr. Debashish Mitra, who is our third panelist, was born in the Dogra regiment, and he's now doing a research and writing on the role of the Dogras in the wars, and he's worked in a lot of multinationals such as PepsiCo and ITC, and he will lead us through today on the history of the Dogras in the First and the Second World Wars. We'll start this morning's discussion with my first question to Debashish. Debashish, when were the Dogra battalions raised, and what was the insignia then, and for how long?
Major Kohli. May I call you Moshe? It's probably easier than calling you Major Kohli. It doesn't do service.
You're the
Battalions were actually the first organized force was almost 200 years ago by Maharaja Gulab Singh as a part of the JK army, and which later on became a part of the Frontier Force Rifles. But the formal Dogra regiments, which was part of the Bengal infantry, was given the number 37, which was first Dogras, which was in the 1880s, followed very quickly thereafter by the second Dogras. So the first had the number 37, the second had the number 38, and 120 years ago was the third Dogras, which had the number 41. Now, my journey is actually, I've got these two logos here. This is what the crown was when the Dogras were given. They were part of the infantry, the crown infantry, which was prevalent across the British Indian Army at that time. And from then till the 19 carried this particular logo, and the different battalions had a number, distinctive number attached to that. And it was in the 1950s that we moved from the crown to becoming a tiger. And therein lies the story, which is what my book is about. It's about the birth. I was a bit confused whether I should say birth of the tiger, because I do think that amongst all the tigers, the Dogras are the tigers. But we're keeping it simple because we are people who don't speak more and do perhaps more than we set out to do. So it's called Birth of a Tiger. Now, the story of the Dogras, you briefly described General Ranbir's career. And if I recall correctly, he started from a school in Punjab and thereafter, grew to the kind of levels that he did and the exposure that he's had and the performance that he delivered in very complex and difficult terrains, where perhaps the schooling may not have exposed him to the kind of challenges that he set out and achieved. So in a sense, the Dogra story, or the story of the Dogra, is about ordinary people achieving extraordinary things far away from their comfort zones, from the lands that they grew up in, their terrains, their families, their culture, and how when they're taken out and asked to perform in very, very different and hostile environments, they stand tall and perform at exceptional levels. Is this? So I will start off by talking about the Victoria Cross, which is the highest gallantry award that was given during the British times or in the British system, equivalent to our Paramveer Chakra, which is the highest gallantry award that we have after independence. And it was given not to an officer who led his battalion on, killed many people or captured peaks and all. It was a very simple bugler in the battalion's band, who's obviously not just playing the bugle, but they also are soldiers. So he was attached to this officer of his, not, as I said, in a faraway land, not in Dogra country, but in France. And faraway France, during the First World War, which was probably one of the most cruelest live campaigns and wars that were fought, because that's the time where, unfortunately, the world also experimented with a lot of the weapons that we now know, whether it's creating tanks, whether it is poison gas, mustard gas, automation, machine guns, horses, all sorts of things are working together. Jamidar Lala from the 3rd Dogras was with his officer who was grievously wounded and who told him that, look, leave me and go save your life. And at that time, he was an ordinary soldier, Jawan. And he said, no, you are my officer. I'm with you. I will carry you to safety. And braving enemy bullets, he put the officer on his back and took him to safety and, saved his life. And he was given a Victoria Cross for that. So this is an example of an ordinary soldier doing extraordinary things in very, very difficult environments and in a foreign terrain. So I think the story of the Dogras is very much that. They are people who come from a very specific part of India, which I'm sure Ranbir will also share. But it's pretty much in the J&K, Himachal, we can call it undivided Punjab, and parts of Balochistan, which is now Pakistan. But they showed their valor and capability across the world. And again, it's very interesting that First World War was primarily in Europe, like I mentioned, in the battlefields of France and Flanders, where they got a large number of battle honors, 10 in fact, which they're allowed to carry. And thereafter in World War II, it was not again in the battlefields of Europe, but it was in a completely different terrain, which was the tropical forests and jungles of Burma and Malaysia, where they fought and excelled. Now, both to where they grew up. So you can visualize this picture of ordinary boys growing up in the hills of Kangra and places like that, and then just being sent out and performing exceptionally well. So this is the essence of what my research is about, to look at what is it that makes these very simple people from a composite geography with a composite culture move out into very different parts of the world under very good leadership, obviously, which is also grained in the traditions of the regiment and the culture and practices, and go ahead and perform at this outstanding levels that we have seen through the history of the Dogras. Now, I also want to emphasize a point because it's contextual that we look at our independence, we look at 70 plus years, and it's a fairly long time. Now, 70 plus years from when the Dogras were first raised takes you almost into independence. Now, in that period, they've done exceptionally well, gone through multiple changes, and have demonstrated this essential part, which is ordinary people doing extraordinary things, which is now embedded in the motto of the battalion, Kartavyam Anavatvam, which is duty before self. And this is the essence of what my research is going to be about. I'll highlight a few more points, and then we can perhaps discuss it when we open up later. Very often, I think, in the writing of history, and Sanjeev, Dr. Chopra is an eminent thinker, historian in his own way, and he relates the lessons of history to contemporary affairs. And as he said, history and strategy, one leads to the other. We do have a bias, unfortunately, in a lot of our writing, which is primarily around the Western world and what happens in Western theaters. So World War II pretty much is a discussion mainly around what happened in Europe, because the protagonists were primarily from there. The Burma campaign and what happened in the, I'm coming out of World War II, I'm just leaving World War I behind, because the first and Dogras fought there. They fought mainly in France, and then of course in Palestine, again against the Turks, different territories again, very different. And they were switched from one side to the other. They moved out of France and into Turkey and Palestine desert. So you can imagine from the snows and rain and slushy fields of Flanders to go and fight in a completely different terrain, literally in months. And there's no cribbing and crying about it. That adaptability, which is an important aspect of modern times, was very much prevalent in the ethos of the Dogras. So that's what First War taught us. The Dogras were people who could come out small areas, perform in very, very challenging and different terrains, very different opponents, because fighting the Germans was different from fighting the Turks, but they did both very, very well, and they got a number of gallantry awards and battle honors for their performance in World War I. World War II.
Debashish, would you like to tell us about the battle in the Second World War? And what did the Dogras do differently, which we are teaching for today? Because I think that is one of your facets that you're covering in your study of the Dogra regiment.
Right. Thanks, Moshe. That's a good question, and thank you for putting it forward, because therein lies an interesting tale again. So I was on this point about explaining how World War II is seen more as, if I may use the term, a white man's war amongst white men. And yes, there was something happening in Asia, and there were Japanese and so on and so forth. Not many people know that the first shots that were fired against the Japanese was not in Pearl Harbor, but in fact 90 minutes before, in a place called Kota Baru, which was in Malaysia, where the Japanese had a huge amphibious landing, and that particular beach and the airfield was being defended by 3rd Dogras. And probably, I'm still researching the details, but the first Indian casualty was a Captain Naveen Sharma of 3rd Dogras, who was on the beach guarding and fighting the Japanese that were landing. The Japanese lost 3,500 people, just in that landing and the assault. The Dogras, 3rd Dogras particularly, had very severe casualties, but they held on, and perhaps the first step towards the creation of the Tiger happened in that famous battle, and 3rd Dogras got a battle honor for the Battle of Kota Baru. Now, herein also lies an interesting story about the resilience of the Dogras, and from there, I would say the resilience of the army led by the people of that time, which also included my father because he was part of the same thing. And again, I would say the story, he's from Odisha, a state not known for martial races and so on and so forth, but came forward, fought the war, went on to Surabaya and so on. Now, what happened in World War II in the Burma campaign? I was sharing with you about the orientation that, yes, the battle theaters of Europe were very complex and tough, and we know about what the Russians did, Stalingrad, Dunkirk, Normandy, and so on. But most people don't know that actually the campaign from Imphal to Singapore was longer. It's 4,000 kilometers versus 3,000 kilometers of Normandy to Berlin and Moscow to Berlin, if you combine both together. And this is the terrain and the trail that the Dogras went through. They had to retreat, through 41 all the way down to 44 up to Imphal, held the positions in Imphal, and then came roaring back, as the tiger did, all the way from Imphal to Singapore, where the first Dogras were given the honor of giving the Guard of Honor at the Victory Parade on 12 September 1945. And therefore, the tiger, in a sense, looked back, which is how we make a symbol saying, I'll be back. I may have left Kota Baru and may have gone back and retreat, but I held myself in Imphal and I came roaring back all the way to Singapore, where the Japanese had interred their fellow mates in the prisoner of war camps. Now, what is also important here, again, about the adaptability and the ability of these people to do new things, and it's contextual again, because we talk about Tri-Services Command, we talk about integration of air, land, and water warfare. But what is perhaps not known is that when the assault on Singapore was planned in 1945, it was an amphibious assault. And the first Dogras came by amphibious boat, landed on the beaches of Singapore. Of course, Hiroshima had happened, so the Japanese capitulated pretty quickly. But these troops were trained for amphibious landings, very different from what they'd undergone before in jungle warfare and so on. So again, it's a part of the adaptability of the Dogras, their perseverance in the face of severe aggression, and their ability to coolly come back and take back what is theirs. So this is the context of the birth of the tiger, which is from Kota Baru back to Imphal and all the way back roaring to Singapore, taking the surrender of the Japanese, and from story moved from the crown to the tiger.
Thank you very much, Debashish. I think that was a detailed insight into the history of the Valiant Dogras as to how they've progressed through the First and Second World War and brought glory to the nation right till independence. To tell us the story as to how the regiment progressed and how it grew in battalions, may I now request General Ranbir to kindly educate us on the progress of the Dogras post-independence and how the regiment expanded to where it is today.
Ladies and gentlemen, Jai Hind, and thank you very much. At the very outset, let me thank Debashish for he's given us such a comprehensive account of the raising of the regiment, of coming up of the Dogra soldiers, and how each one of them performed in the pre-independence era. If I was just to summarize, he spoke about the gallantry, the courage, the bravery which was exhibited by the Dogra soldiers in France and Flanders, in Egypt, in Palestine, in Aden, and in Mesopotamia. But most importantly, the regiment won 20 battle honors and 2 Victoria Crosses. Captain J.A. Sinton, a medical officer of 37th Dogras, he got the Victoria Cross in the Battle of Sheikh Saad. And Last Naik Lala of 41st Dogras, he got it in the Battle of Hana. But the regiment, true to its traditions, also performed equally well in World War II and were awarded 5 battle honors in Malaya, in Arakan, in Manipur, and in Burma. And Sepoy Bandari-Ram, he won a Victoria Cross on the Arakan front. The period also saw the Dogras being awarded numerous honors and awards for their exemplary performance during operations.
302 gallantry awards, you're right, sir.
From here onwards starts the history after independence. The Dogras had earned such a good name for themselves, and at the time of independence, we had only 4 Dogra battalions. 1st Dogra, 2nd Dogra, 3rd Dogra, and 4 Dogra. And immediately after independence, when the battalions which had to go to Pakistan, they had to shed their additional manpower, which was comprising of the Dogra troops. That additional manpower was initially given as surplus strength to 1st, 2nd, 3rd, and 4th Dogras. But very soon a decision was taken in 1948 that additional Dogra battalions must be raised for the wonderful performance that they had been able to demonstrate during World War I and II. And therefore, 9 Dogra was raised on 26th January 1948. 8 Dogra was raised on 1st February 1948 and 13 Dogra on 6th April 1948. And thereafter, additional battalions continued to be raised as a part of the modernization plans of the Indian Army. Today, the Dogra regiment stands proud with one of the maximum strengths. We have got 21 battalions, of which 1st Dogra has been converted into a mechanized infantry battalion and rechristened as 7 Mechanized Infantry Battalion Dogra. We have got 1 Dogra Scouts Battalion, 4 Rashtra Rifle Battalions, and 4 Territorial Army Battalions. Today, the regiment can boast of a strength of nearly more than 400 serving officers and over 30,000 JCOs and other ranks on the active list of the regiment. The regiment, even after independence in all the operations, has made the supreme sacrifice of over 1,500 officers and Jawans of the army. Post-independence, the battalions of the regiment have participated in all the operations, whether it was the 1947-48 operations, which was immediately after we attained independence, or it was 1962, the Sino-Indian War, the 1965 and 1971 Indo-Pakistan wars. But the regiment earned a name for itself in each of these operations. You would recall that in 1947 operations, 2 brothers, Major Prem Chand and Major Kushal Chand, along with Subedar Bhim Chand and 12 Jawans of 2 Dogra, they marched from Sonamarg to Leh, crossing the treacherous Zojila Pass and the snow-laden terrain, which was fractured with crevices and avalanches in the peak of winters, but they raised a garrison force of locals which repeatedly thwarted the enemy's attempts for the capture of Ladakh. These gallant soldiers are immortalized by the pseudonym as Saviors of Leh, and their glorious exploits are enshrined in the annals of Indian history. During the 1948 operations, we had 2 Dogra and 4 Dogra. Both the battalions provided an excellent account of themselves, accomplishing challenging tasks assigned to them during the war. 2 Dogra won the battle honor of Uri and the theatre honor of Jammu and Kashmir. 4 Dogra got the battle honor of Jhangarh and Rajouri and theatre honor of Jammu and Kashmir. No sooner was the army getting operationally committed in Jammu and Kashmir, trouble also started brewing up in the state of Hyderabad, which required army's intervention. Operation Polo was the code name given to an operation in September 1948 by the newly created independent Dominion of India against the Hyderabad forces. 9 Dogra was selected to be a part of the overall force which was required to go and carry out the annexation of the state of Hyderabad. 9 Dogra was a part of the strike force and performed the operations commendably as a part of the overall strike force. It was a military operation in which the Indian armed forces invaded the Nizam-ruled princely state, annexing it and making it an inalienable and integral part of the Indian Union. Large number of casualties were inflicted on the Hyderabad forces and the Razakars, and huge quantities of arms and ammunition were recovered from them. A few years later, we were involved in the 1962 Sino-India War, in which 13 Dogra participated in operations in the calming sector of Nifa, and 4 Dogra participated in a very valiant battle of Walong in Nifa again. The Dogras, amongst others, paid a very dear price to stem the Chinese advance in the sector. We also had 8 Dogra, which was the first unit to be deployed in the Joshimath sector along the UP-Tibet border, and they too carried out their task exceedingly well. And within less than 3 years of the Chinese aggression, the Indian Army was again to take part in another major operation, this time in Jammu and Kashmir and the western sector of Punjab. Most of the battalions of the regiment participated in the 1965 Indo-Pakistan War, and their claim to battle honors of Haji Pir, which was won by 6 Dogra, Dograi won by 15 Dogra, Asal Uttar won by 1st Dogra, OP Hill captured and battle honor won by 2 Dogra, and Raja Piget and Chand Tekri, the battle honor won by 3 Dogra. This amounted, ladies and gentlemen, to nearly 50% of the battle honors which had been won by the whole Indian Army. But the Dogras had done the army proud by bagging nearly 50% of the battle honors during this war. It is a testimony to the valor of Dogras and the Dogra regiment. In the Indo-Pak War of 1971, the Dogras undoubtedly put up a stellar performance again, both on the eastern and the western theaters. As in the previous wars, the Dogras lived up to their legendary reputation with 4 more battle honors. Chaudagram, which was won by 3 Dogra, which was being commanded by Lieutenant Colonel A.S. Chopra at that time. The battle honor of Swadi by 9 Dogra, which was being commanded by Lieutenant Colonel Kirpal Singh Kohli, who later rose to become a Major General. And we are proud this evening that we have his son, distinguished personality Major Moshe Kohli, who is moderating the discussion this evening. The Battle of Siramani and the battle honor won by 13 Dogra, which was being commanded by Lieutenant Colonel TGPM Nair. And Dera Baba Nanak in Punjab, a battle honor won by 10 Dogra, commanded by Lieutenant Colonel Narinder Singh Sandhu. The Dogras actually had the proud privilege of hoisting the first Indian flag in the captured territory of Dera Baba Nanak in West Pakistan. And on the other front, 9 Dogra was chosen to lead the division's advance into East Pakistan. On 3rd and 4th December, the battalion under the command of Lieutenant Colonel K.S. Kohli fought one of the fiercest battles on the outskirts of Shahpur at a very well fortified and a strongly held locality at a place called Swadi. The battalion actually had to carry out a daring daytime frontal attack without adequate armor and artillery support. But true to the spirit of Dogras, despite paying dearly in terms of casualties, but the objective was captured that laid bare the plans for the brigade to be unfolding as per the original plan. The assaulting company actually suffered 16 fatal casualties, including the platoon commander, 2nd Lieutenant Bharat Singh Kasana, who was posthumously awarded the Veer Chakra. Such acts of valor of all the battalions of the regiment at Shakargarh, Islamgarh, Chicken's Neck in the Western Theatre, Khulna, Chaudagram, and Swadi in East Pakistan are also enshrined into the history of not only the regiment but the Indian Army. Ever since independence, we have also witnessed a very turbulent times as far as terrorism and insurgency are concerned. Terrorism has not only engulfed parts of our country, but the world over. Battalions of the regiment have successfully participated in counter-terrorism and counter-insurgency operations in the northeastern states of Nagaland, Manipur, Mizoram, and Arunachal Pradesh, Punjab, Jammu and Kashmir, and even Operation Pavan as a part of the Indian peacekeeping force in Sri Lanka. It is to the credit of the regiment that post-independence, the regiment has earned 1 Ashok Chakra, highest peacetime gallantry award, a Padma Bhushan, 9 Mahavir Chakras, 11 Kirti Chakras, 2 Padma Shris, a bar to Veer Chakra, 38 Veer Chakras, a bar to Shaurya Chakra, 58 Shaurya Chakras, 3 Yudh Seva medals, 7 bar to Sena medals, and over 330 Sena medals for gallantry. So such has been the tradition, the richness of the regiment, that wherever they went, they performed exceedingly well. I shall take on any other questions as felt proper by the moderator.
General, thank you very much. You've given us a detailed insight into the saga of gallantry of the Dogra regiment, and we've carried it forward not from since times immemorial, and the story carries on. What is it that actually makes a simple farmer's son who comes from the foothills of the Punjab or the foothills of Kashmir, what role does the center play in turning them into making them these mean fighting machines? Could you throw us a little light as to how does the center and the battalion transform this man from the village into who's very modest, who's just comes in as a simple Indian wanting to join the army? What role does the center and the unit play in shaping him?
Thank you very much, Major Kohli. I think you've touched your finger on a very, very important point. Actually, it is the regimental center, the Dogra regimental center, which is the nerve center. It is the crucible into which are thrown young gawky boys who are then transformed into the most sought after gentlemen soldiers in the world. The Dogra soldier is the most sought after because he's got an impressive personality, he has got courteous manners, and he has got the most refined soldierly skills. The Dogra Regimental Center started off as a training battalion at Jalandhar in 1922, thereafter moved to Meerut in 1952, and finally to its present abode at Faizabad in 1976. It is often said in the army that during war, victory is invariably going to the side which is better trained, better motivated, has got a higher morale. It has therefore been the primary concern of the Dogra Regimental Center to instill these soldierly attributes in these budding soldiers who come from the foothills and from such far-flung areas, but then they are transformed in the center, and finally the finish is given when they go back to the battalions. But it is to the credit of our teams in the center, to the current colonel of the regiment, the center commandant and their teams, who have been able to shape these soldiers into one of the best fighting machines, which every senior commander looks for getting into his fold so that they can give them suitable results. So Dogra Regimental Center has performed an exceptional task in each of the shaping of the Dogra soldiers, which has led to good results being achieved.
Thank you. Dr. Chopra, I would like to ask you, as a very senior and a respected bureaucrat, what are the ethos that you teach your officers in the academy as to of the civil military liaison to run this country and take it to greater heights? What do you teach them that there is such an interactive bonding between the civil administration and the military, particularly in difficult areas?
Thank you, Major Kohli. It's very important that there is a very active understanding of how we all operate, how we all function, and therefore, the very first thing which IS officers do when they join the Phase 1 is that they go for their army attachment. This is one of the most memorable and one of the most significant attachments which our officers do. They spend about 2 to 3 weeks with advanced formations of the army. I recall my attachment with the 7th Sikh Light Infantry that was in close to Srinagar, Akrul. So I remember that time very much, and I'm sure those officers who've been attached or who've been associated with the Dogras, they'll remember that association very well. It's very important for us in all the services to understand and acknowledge that India has to fight together. India has to develop its strategy together, and for that it's very important that we all work together. In fact, remember this recent book called The Absent Dialogue, in which it shows that we don't understand the army doesn't understand us, and none of us understands the political leadership, and the political leadership is not. I think that is an exaggerated account of what actually happens on the ground. There are mostly good. There's mostly a good rapport and a good relationship. There are bad oddballs everywhere, but I think it's important that all services, so not just the IAS, but the IPS, the foreign service, the forest service, the economic service, the ordnance factory service, and that's precisely what the Prime Minister is now saying. He says, break silos, work together, train together. And I'm glad to share with you that now part of the recommendation of the Kargil Committee report was that the academy should play a lead role in having joint civil-military, dialogues, and we do that twice a year. This year we can do it, and that's where we came across General Pannu. That's where we came across a lot of army generals who are thinking deeply. We came across Middle Belt. So that's something that we started doing. I agree with you that much more needs to be done, and that's why we are into these sessions as well. Because all of us must think that the strategy for India, the strategy for a new India, one of the strategies is that we stop thinking in silos and we think together and think strategically.
Thank you very much, Doctor. One more question, which you'd mentioned in your opening remarks on General Zorawar Singh, who's also called the Napoleon of the East. Would you throw us a little light on the role of the Dogra generals in the expansion of the Sikh Empire?
Well, thank you for this question. I studied Sikh history formally as a student of history at Patsagola, Jalandhar. And I really would like to highlight the fact that at that point of time, I mean, if the kingdom of Ranjit Singh could have continued, and if General Zorawar Singh, if we could have, the British did have they played a very, they played what they had to do. So I think what we need to acknowledge is, what we need to mention is the heroism of General Zorawar Singh, because he crossed the then known Indian territory. The first person to have crossed the Indian territory, because all our history has been about people coming and taking over our territory. So whether it was from Gandhar, or whether it was from the Arabs, or whether it was from the Sindh, this was the first and perhaps the only instance of a fighting force going ahead. We've had a lot of cultural ambassadorships from the Bali Islands. We had the Bali Jatra. We moved to Cambodia, but these were all spiritual aspects. These were all cultural aspects. This was the soft part of India going on. But hard military part, the actual strength of Indian fighting forces, going and occupying territories which hitherto had not been Indian, and then planting the flag, and then changing the course of territory and the course of history, that credit goes to General Zorawar Singh. And I think all of us need to salute him for his absolutely great thing. In fact, all these areas which are now in POK, Gilgit, and all these places, Pakistan, these are all the contribution of the Valiant Dogras. So I think all of us need to acknowledge, salute, and pay our tribute to the Valiant Dogras.
Thank you very much, Doctor. I think that was very, very informative. General Ranbir, you've served twice with the United Nations yourself in two separate postings. Can you throw a little light on what the Dogra Regiment has done towards the United Nations peacekeeping roles post-independence?
Thank you very much. The Dogra Regiment has not only contributed to the United Nations peacekeeping forces in the earlier years in Gaza Strip, Korea, Lebanon, and Congo, but it has also contributed in providing various military observers, staff officers, and some specialist appointments in several other peacekeeping operations around the globe. 3 Dogra was the first unit of independent India to go abroad on a multinational assignment, and it did the Indian Army proud. 3 Dogra under Lieutenant Colonel M.G. Hazari were ordered to move to Korea as a part of the UN custodian force in July 1953. Subsequently, in 1961, on the request of the United Nations, 1st Dogra, as a part of the brigade group, also moved to Congo to address the growing unrest in the country. In 1963, 9 Dogra was specially chosen for duty with the UN Expeditionary Force in Gaza. History repeated itself when the Dogra troops landed in the Sinai Desert in Gaza Strip, where earlier 38 Dogras and 41st Dogras had fought during the World War I. After that, we have had nearly 11 battalions which have gone for United Nations peacekeeping operations. As on date, 9 Dogra is currently on a United Nations peacekeeping operation mission in Lebanon. This is the second time that 9 Dogra has gone on a UN mission after independence. The Dogra regiment is also proud to have Major General V.K. Jetley, who later retired as a Lieutenant General. He was appointed as the first force commander of the United Nations mission in Sierra Leone in November 1999. During his tenure with the mission, he set about the daunting task of not only establishing the mission in virgin territory, but also bringing peace and solace to the troubled inhabitants of Sierra Leone. And if I could be permitted to just add on that the Dogra regiment, not only in UN peacekeeping operations, but we have also made huge contribution in the field of adventure, in the field of sports, and the Dogras have proved their mettle in the professional and sporting fields. You would recall that in 2012, Subedar Major Vijay Kumar of the regiment, he brought glory to all of us, to the nation, by winning the silver medal in the individual 25-meter rapid-fire pistol event in the 2012 Olympics. The regiment has also given excellent mountaineers. A very famous name, Major, later Lieutenant Colonel Premchand, was awarded the Indian Mountaineering Federation Gold Medal for outstanding feats in the field of mountaineering. Similarly, Lieutenant Colonel S.C. Sharma and Brigadier Ashok Abe have been bestowed with the Tenzing Norgay National Adventure Award for lifetime achievement in the field of mountaineering. And we also had an icing on the cake when, in the glorious chapter of the regiment, we had General N.C. Witch, who took over as the 21st Chief of Army Staff, first by a Dogra officer, and held the office from 2003 to 2005. Each one of them have brought laurels to the regiment. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Debashish, coming back to you, is there some facet of the regiment, now that you're carrying out a research for your book, that you would like to bring out for our knowledge and for the knowledge of our listeners?
I think I'd just like to highlight, I'll build it back to the story of 3rd Kota Baru and the birth of the tiger. General Ranbir has, very nicely highlighted who were the battalions who fought and what actually happened. So here is an important aspect of what valor brings in posterity and in perpetuity, I would say. What is known, may not be known as well, is that in World War II, the battalion regiment did win over 300 gallantry awards, 1,325 people were martyred. But the story of 3rd Dogras is very interesting. That from the Battle of Kota Baru till they went back into Singapore in 1942, they almost lost 600 men, which means the battalion was practically wiped out. And they were prisoners of war. When 1945 happened and the Japanese surrendered, this battalion could have been disbanded and merged. But a decision was taken because of their valor to keep 3rd going. And 7 Dogras who were there at that time got merged into 3rd Dogras, and 3rd Dogras was, in a way, reformed, you can say. I won't say re-raised. That was in 1946. And therefore, the question here is that if you have a battalion that displays the kind of valor that 3rd Dogras did at Kota Baru and down to 1942, it not only carries on in terms of its memory, but it brings something much deeper and wider. So this is an example which is important to understand, that you never vanish. As a tiger, you never vanish. You leave your imprint behind. And 3rd Dogras did just that. They were re-raised because of their valor. So there's one aspect I would like to point out, because it's an important part of the birth of the tiger story that we are discussing. It is one little omission, though, in my research. Sorry, if I can just, in fact, it's a question I would say, which General Ranbir could probably throw some light, that whilst, there were 4 battle honors that were won in battles in World War II, Kota Baru, Magwe, Nungchikam, amongst them, they have not been brought into the Dogra regiment's battle honors list, although 10 of the First World War ones are there. So I'm not sure exactly why this particular thing happened. That's one aspect which my research will probably bring to light. The other important thing, which is adaptability and belief in regimental and battalion traditions, as General Ranbir rightly pointed out, that 46 was a melting pot. You know, you had Baluch regiments who were being disbanded with Dogra battalions who came back and got re-raised. And you went back and fought your compatriots. I mean, the Baluch regiment was in Pakistan in 1948. We were fighting the Baluchis, although they were, you know, now Dogra battalions who were on this side. So I think the issue of the spirit and the loyalty, commitment that is brought into us, our people, from the regimental center through the battalions is an aspect that needs to be appreciated, that they stand for their valor, their duty, their honor, and they are not just people who could be taken lightly, but any task in a cross-cultural context also, when thrown at them, they do extremely, extremely well. And the story of what happened in Burma in World War II, and later on immediately in Korea, because Korea also was an interesting place where soldiers of First Dogras who fought World War, you know, on the British side, got together with these people. One of the Subadars was actually a prisoner of war, and he learnt Korean, and he knew that the Korean troops were part of the Japanese forces who were actually looking after them and so on. So they're aware people. It's not something that they're not, you know, sharp on the ground and able to understand. And I think that's an important aspect, that when you go out into the world and you have to compete, whatever field you may pick, this aspect of, you know, keeping your feet on the ground, being aware, choosing your target carefully, and then ensuring that your hunt succeeds is what epitomizes the tiger and epitomizes the Dogra, whether it's a mountaineering peak or a battle or a sporting event.
Debashish, thank you very much. I think I'd like to...
we're running out of time. We are running out of time, so I have to request Moshe Kohli we'll have to give the last comment from your side.
Yeah, I would just like to first thank the panelists for being with us today, and all the audience who've had the chance to listen to men of such eminence. But actually, we are not only celebrating the valor of the Dogra regiment, because the Dogra troops have done and brought glory in all the other regiments that they serve with. The Dogras are part of the Jammu and Kashmir Rifles, they're part of the Armored Corps, they're part of the Punjab regiment, they're part of every other aspect of the Army, Navy, and Air Force. The Dogras have done exceedingly well, and the Dogra regiment has led from the front and brought glory to themselves and the nation. So we salute the valiant Dogras, and thank you very much, Dr. Sanjeev. We wish the rest of the Valley of Words a great success, and thank you for having arranging such a fantastic panel. Ranbir for finding time. Debashish, all the very best for your book. Thank you very much, gentlemen. Thank you, audience, and have a great one. Thank you. Bye-bye.